My name is Elena, and I'm 41 years old. 3 months ago, I was sitting in a chemotherapy infusion chair at Memorial Regional Cancer Center, watching poison drip into my veins through a port in my chest. When the door to the treatment room swung open, and a woman I'd never seen before walked in carrying a bouquet of sunflowers. She was beautiful, younger than me, maybe 32, with long auburn hair and perfectly manicured nails painted the exact shade of coral I'd stopped wearing years ago because my husband said it made me look cheap. She walked right past the nurse's station, right past the other patients hooked up to their IVs, and stopped directly in front of my chair. She looked at my bald head, at the dark circles under my eyes, at the port visible beneath my hospital gown, and she smiled. Not a sympathetic smile, not a nervous smile, a triumphant one. And then she said 5 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. I'm having Marcus's baby. My oncologist, Dr. Amira Hassan, was standing 3 feet away reviewing my latest blood work. She looked up from her tablet, looked at this woman, looked at me, and what she said next destroyed that woman's entire plan. But I'm getting ahead of myself. What I didn't know in that moment was that this confrontation had been choreographed for months, that my husband had been planning his exit strategy since the day I was diagnosed, and that the woman standing in front of me had no idea she was just as much a victim as I was. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I have a feeling this story is going to hit different depending on what you've been through. Let me take you back to where it all began. I met Marcus David Coleman at a hospital fundraiser in the fall of 2006. I was 24 years old, fresh out of my MBA program, working as a junior development officer for the hospital foundation. He was 31, a successful commercial real estate developer who had just donated $250,000 toward the new pediatric wing. Everyone at the gala was talking about him. Handsome, charming, generous, single. When he asked me to dance, I felt like I'd won some kind of cosmic lottery. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Within 3 months, he'd introduced me to his mother. Within 6 months, he'd proposed with a 3-carat diamond that felt heavy on my finger in a way I told myself was romantic. Within a year, we were married in a ceremony that cost more than my parents' house. I remember standing at the altar, watching Marcus slip the wedding band onto my finger, and feeling like I was stepping into a fairy tale. The first red flag came on our honeymoon. We were in Maui, staying at a resort that cost $4,000 a night. On our 3rd evening there, I mentioned that I wanted to call my mother to check in. I missed her. The wedding had been such a whirlwind, and I hadn't had a chance to really talk to her about everything. Marcus looked up from his scotch and said, "Elena, we just spent $200,000 on a wedding that your family contributed nothing to. The least you can do is give me your undivided attention for 2 weeks." I remember the way my stomach dropped, the way I immediately started calculating. My parents had offered to contribute. They'd saved $18,000. But Marcus had said the wedding he wanted required a certain budget, and their contribution would be, and I remember his exact words, "more trouble than it's worth to coordinate." So they'd use that money to pay off their car instead, at his suggestion. I told myself it didn't matter. He was right, wasn't he? This was our honeymoon. My mother would understand. I didn't call her. When we got home, I tried to establish a rhythm of Sunday dinners with my family. My parents lived 40 minutes away, in the same modest 3-bedroom house where I'd grown up. My mother made pot roast every Sunday, had done so for as long as I could remember. The smell of it, carrots and potatoes and beef slow cooking all afternoon, was the smell of home to me. Marcus came to the first dinner. He sat at my father's table, ate my mother's food, and afterward, in the car, he said, "I'm not doing that again." I asked him why. Elena, your father spent the entire meal talking about baseball. Baseball. Like I care about the Cleveland Guardians pitching rotation. And your mother kept asking about grandchildren like she's entitled to our reproductive choices. It's exhausting. You can go if you want, but I have better things to do with my Sundays. I told myself it made sense. Marcus worked hard all week. He needed his weekends to decompress. I would just go alone, keep the peace. That's how it started. Small concessions, tiny adjustments, the slow, methodical trimming of everything that wasn't Marcus-shaped until my entire life fit into the space he'd designated for me. The second red flag came during my first pregnancy. I was 27, 2 years into our marriage. When I told Marcus I was pregnant, he was thrilled. He talked about legacy, about the Coleman name, about raising a son who would eventually take over the business. I didn't point out that we didn't know the gender yet. I was just happy. He was happy. At 16 weeks, we found out we were having a girl. The ultrasound technician showed us the image on the screen, pointed out the little profile, the perfect nose, the tiny fingers. I was crying. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears, the kind of tears that come when you see something miraculous. Marcus was quiet. In the car afterward, I asked him what was wrong. He stared straight ahead, hands on the steering wheel, and said, "I was really counting on a boy, Elena. You know how important the Coleman name is to my family. A girl is fine, but we'll need to try again as soon as possible after this one." Our daughter wasn't even born yet, and she was already fine, already a stepping stone toward the son he actually wanted. I told myself he didn't mean it the way it sounded. New fathers got nervous. He would fall in love with her the moment he saw her. Sophia Grace Coleman was born on March 14th, 2009, at 3:47 a.m. after 18 hours of labor. She was 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and her father's green eyes. When the nurse placed her on my chest, I understood for the first time what people meant when they talked about love at first sight. Marcus held her for exactly 4 minutes before handing her back. "She's beautiful," he said, "but she looks exactly like you. I was hoping she'd have my coloring." I told myself that was a compliment. That looking like me wasn't a bad thing. Sophia was 3 months old when I found out I was pregnant again. I was exhausted, still breastfeeding, still waking up every 2 hours. When I told Marcus, tears streaming down my face because I didn't know how I would handle 2 babies under 1-year-old, he smiled and said, "Maybe this one will be the boy." It wasn't. Our second daughter, Mia Rose, was born on February 2nd, 2010. Another beautiful girl, another perfect child. Another disappointment, apparently, to her father. But something changed after Mia was born. Marcus stopped talking about trying again. He stopped talking about a lot of things, actually. He started working later, traveling more, coming home smelling like perfume he explained away as client meetings. I was too exhausted to question it. I had a 1-year-old and a newborn. I was surviving on 4 hours of sleep and cold coffee. I didn't have the energy to be suspicious. In 2012, when Sophia was 3 and Mia was 2, I found the first piece of evidence. I was doing laundry. Marcus had gotten home from a business trip to Chicago the night before, and I was emptying his suitcase into the washing machine. In the front pocket, folded into a small square, was a receipt from Tiffany and Company for a diamond pendant. $1,400. My birthday had been 2 months earlier. He'd gotten me a Keurig. I stood in our laundry room, holding that receipt, and I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe it was for his mother. Maybe it was a gift for a client. Maybe it was a surprise for me that hadn't arrived yet. I didn't ask him about it. I put the receipt back in his suitcase pocket, finished the laundry, and made dinner. Chicken parmesan, his favorite. That night he told me he loved me, and I told myself the receipt didn't matter. Over the next decade, I became an expert at telling myself things didn't matter. The late nights didn't matter. The business trips that stretched from 3 days to 5 days to a full week didn't matter. The way he started showering immediately when he got home, before he even hugged the girls, didn't matter. The second phone I found in his desk drawer, the one with a lock screen photo of a beach I'd never been to, didn't matter. I put it back and pretended I'd never seen it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself all marriages went through phases. I told myself the girls needed their father, needed an intact family, needed me to hold it together. What I was really doing was dying. Slowly, quietly, piece by piece. The girls grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside, a 6-bedroom colonial in the nicest suburb of our city with a pool in the backyard and a Range Rover in the driveway. They went to private school. They had piano lessons and dance classes and summer camp in Maine. They had everything money could buy. What they didn't have was a mother who trusted her own instincts. What they didn't have was parents who loved each other. What they didn't have was honesty. In 2018, when Sophia was 9 and Mia was 8, my friend Diana pulled me aside at a school fundraiser. Diana was married to one of Marcus's business partners. She was the kind of woman who always knew things, who had connections everywhere, who heard whispers before they became shouts. She pulled me into the coat room of the country club, checked to make sure we were alone, and said, "Elena, I need to tell you something, and I need you to not shoot the messenger." My heart was pounding. I knew. In that moment, I knew what she was going to say. Marcus has been seeing someone. It's been going on for at least a year. Her name is Kelsey. She works at that new boutique downtown, the one on Main Street. I've seen them together twice. I didn't want to say anything, but Kevin and I were in Chicago last weekend, and they were at the restaurant in our hotel. He didn't see us, but Elena, they were not acting like business associates. I thanked her. I hugged her. I told her I appreciated her honesty. And then I went home and did nothing. I didn't confront Marcus. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't call a lawyer. I picked up my daughters from their sleepover, made them chocolate chip pancakes for dinner because it was Sunday, and I was feeling reckless. And I went to bed pretending everything was fine. Looking back, I understand why I did nothing. I was terrified. Marcus controlled all of our finances. The house was in his name. The cars were in his name. I hadn't worked since Sophia was born. I had an 11-year gap on my resume and 2 children who depended on me. The thought of leaving felt like stepping off a cliff with no idea if there was water below. So I stayed. I stayed through the rest of 2018. I stayed through 2019. I stayed through 2020, when the pandemic trapped us all in the same house, and Marcus started sleeping in the guest room because he said I snored. I stayed through 2021, when the girls started high school and I started therapy, finally, secretly, paying for it with cash I skimmed from the grocery budget. My therapist, Dr. Angela Reeves, was the first person to say the words out loud. "Elena, what you're describing is emotional abuse. The gaslighting, the financial control, the isolation from your family. These are not the behaviors of a loving partner. These are the behaviors of someone who is systematically stripping away your sense of self." I cried for the entire session. I told her she was wrong. I told her Marcus wasn't abusive. He was just difficult. He wasn't controlling. He just had high standards. He wasn't unfaithful. He was just busy. She didn't argue with me. She just handed me tissues and said, "When you're ready to see it, you'll see it. I'll be here." I wasn't ready. Not yet. The year I finally started to wake up was 2022. Sophia was 13. Mia was 12. They were becoming teenagers, developing opinions, noticing things. One night in October, I was making dinner when Sophia came into the kitchen. She hopped up on the counter, which she knew she wasn't supposed to do, and watched me chop vegetables. "Mom," she said, in that careful voice children use when they're about to say something they're afraid of. "Can I ask you something?" I told her, of course. "Why do you always agree with Dad, even when he's wrong?" I stopped chopping. "What do you mean?" "Like last week, when he said Mia's painting wasn't good enough to submit to the art show." "It was good, Mom. It was really good. Mrs. Patterson said it was one of the best in the class. But you just sat there and didn't say anything, and Mia didn't submit it. And now she's been sad for days." I didn't have an answer. Not one that would make sense to a 13-year-old. Not one that made sense to me either. That night, after the girls were in bed, I sat in my closet and cried. I cried because Sophia was right. I cried because Mia's painting had been beautiful, a watercolor of our backyard garden in full bloom, and Marcus had called it amateurish, and I had said nothing. I cried because I was raising my daughters to believe that keeping the peace was more important than speaking the truth. I made an appointment with Dr. Reeves for the following week. "I think I'm ready," I told her. "I think I'm finally ready to see it." And then, in February of 2023, I found the lump. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in the shower doing a routine self-exam that I'll admit I often forgot to do, but something made me do it that day. Some instinct, some whisper from somewhere beyond my conscious mind. And there it was, a small, hard knot in my left breast, about the size of a grape. I called my doctor that afternoon. She saw me the next day. By Friday, I was having a mammogram. By the following Tuesday, I was having a biopsy. By the Friday after that, I was sitting in an oncologist's office, listening to words that didn't seem real. Invasive ductal carcinoma, stage 2. Aggressive. We need to start treatment immediately. I remember the exact way Dr. Hassan's office looked that day. The framed diplomas on the wall, the small fake plant on her desk that I would later learn was real and that she watered every morning. The box of tissues she pushed toward me when I started crying. "Mrs. Coleman," she said, and her voice was warm but matter-of-fact. "This is serious, but it's treatable. We're going to fight this with everything we have. But I need you to understand that this fight will be hard. Chemotherapy, surgery, possibly radiation. Your life is going to change." She had no idea how much. I told Marcus that night after the girls were asleep. I sat him down in the living room. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say in my head a dozen times. I'd imagined him holding me, crying with me, promising to be there. I'd imagined us finally coming together in the face of this crisis. I'd imagined this being the thing that saved our marriage. Instead, he sat in his leather armchair, the one that cost $3,000 and that no one else was allowed to sit in, and he listened to me explain that I had cancer. When I finished talking, there was a long silence. "Well," he said finally, "that's inconvenient." Inconvenient. My diagnosis was inconvenient. I'm supposed to close the Harrington deal next month. That's a $40 million commercial development. I can't be distracted by this, Elena. You understand that, right? I nodded. Of course I understood. His work was important. His deals were important. My cancer was inconvenient. "We'll hire someone to help with the girls," he continued, "and we'll need to tell them, obviously. But let's wait until we know more. No need to worry them unnecessarily." I went to bed that night and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I had become so small. My chemotherapy started on March 15th, 2023. The date is seared into my memory because it was the day after Sophia's 14th birthday. We had a party for her the day before, 12 girls in our backyard, a catered lunch, a photo booth, a 3-tier cake from the most expensive bakery in town. Marcus was there for the first hour, then left for a golf game. The girls didn't seem to notice. They were used to it. I didn't tell anyone at the party that I was starting chemo the next day. I smiled and made small talk with the other mothers and pretended everything was normal. The first infusion was brutal. Dr. Hassan had warned me, but nothing prepares you for the reality of it. The cold saline burning through your veins, the waves of nausea that hit before you even leave the hospital, the bone-deep exhaustion that makes every movement feel like walking through wet concrete. Marcus didn't come to that first infusion. He had a meeting. He didn't come to the second infusion either, or the third. By the fourth, I had stopped asking, "Okay, I need to pause here for a second. If you've ever been through something similar, if you've ever felt completely alone during the hardest moment of your life, I want to hear from you. Type in the comments what got you through it. And if this story is hitting close to home, please hit that like button so more people can find it." The person who did come to my infusions was my mother. My mother, 71 years old, drove 40 minutes each way to sit with me for every single treatment. She brought homemade soup in a thermos because the hospital food made me sick. She brought soft blankets because I was always cold. She brought books she thought I might like and magazines full of celebrity gossip that distracted me from the poison dripping into my arm. She didn't say anything about Marcus's absence. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Her presence was everything. In early May, after my 6th infusion, my hair started falling out. I was brushing it one morning, standing at my bathroom sink, and suddenly the brush was full. Not a few strands, not the normal amount of shedding, clumps, handfuls. I stood there, brush frozen in midair, watching my hair slide off my scalp like I was shedding skin. My mother was the one who shaved my head. She did it in my bathroom with clippers she'd bought specifically for this purpose, while I cried and she hummed hymns from her childhood. When it was done, she cupped my bare head in her hands and said, "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever known, and no amount of hair will change that." Marcus saw my bald head for the first time that evening when he got home from work. He walked into the kitchen, looked at me, and his face did something I can only describe as disgusted. He tried to cover it quickly, but I saw it. I saw the way he looked at me like I was something damaged, something broken, something he didn't want anymore. "You should get a wig," he said. "There's a place on Madison that the partners' wives use. I'll have my assistant send you the information." I didn't get a wig. Something in me, some small spark that hadn't been completely extinguished, refused to hide who I was becoming. The chemotherapy continued through the summer. 8 rounds total, each one worse than the last. I lost weight. I lost energy. I lost the ability to taste food, to sleep through the night, to climb the stairs without getting winded. But I didn't lose myself. Somehow, in the process of losing everything else, I started finding myself again. Maybe it was the clarity that comes with facing your own mortality. Maybe it was the hours spent alone in that infusion chair with nothing to do but think. Maybe it was the kindness of the nurses who knew my name, who celebrated my good days and held my hand through the bad ones, who treated me like a person instead of an inconvenience. Whatever it was, I started waking up. I started noticing the things I'd trained myself to ignore. The way Marcus never asked how I was feeling. The way he complained about the side effects of my treatment affecting our household routine. The way he called my mother overbearing for coming to every single infusion when he couldn't be bothered to come to one. I started keeping track. Not consciously at first. But somewhere in July, I opened a note on my phone and started writing things down. Dates, times, specific words. I didn't know why I was doing it. I just knew I needed a record. I needed proof that I wasn't imagining it. July 12th, Marcus complained that the house smells like sick person, his exact words. July 18th. Sophia asked me why Daddy never comes to my appointments. I didn't have an answer. July 24th. Found receipt in Marcus's jacket for dinner at Opal Restaurant. $240. I was home vomiting from chemo. August 2nd. Marcus didn't come home until 3 a.m. Told me he was at a work event. No work events were scheduled on his calendar. August 15th. Overheard Marcus on the phone. He said, "I miss you too," and hung up when he saw me. The evidence was piling up, but I still wasn't ready to confront it. I was in survival mode. I was just trying to get through each day, each treatment, each wave of nausea and exhaustion. I didn't have the energy for a confrontation. My last chemotherapy infusion was on August 28th. Dr. Hassan came to see me afterward, sat down in the chair next to mine, and told me my latest scans looked good. The tumor had shrunk significantly. I was responding well to treatment. We would move forward with surgery in October, then reassess. I cried, tears of relief, of exhaustion, of gratitude for every nurse and doctor who had kept me alive. My mother cried too, holding my hand, thanking God out loud in the middle of the infusion room. Marcus wasn't there. He was in Chicago, closing the Harrington deal. The surgery was scheduled for October 10th. A lumpectomy to remove what remained of the tumor and the surrounding tissue. Dr. Hassan was optimistic. She said if the margins came back clean, I might not even need radiation. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. And then, on October 3rd, 1 week before my surgery, everything changed. I was going through our home office, looking for my insurance card. Marcus had taken over all the billing and paperwork years ago, claiming I didn't understand the complexity of our finances. I needed the card to bring to my pre-surgical appointment, and I couldn't find it in any of the normal places. I opened his desk drawer, the one he kept locked, except he'd forgotten to lock it that morning, apparently. Inside, I found a manila folder, and inside that folder, I found documents that stopped my heart. The first was a life insurance policy on me, $2 million. I knew we had life insurance, we'd taken it out years ago, but this wasn't that policy. This was new. Dated January 2023, 1 month before my diagnosis. Beneficiary, Marcus David Coleman. The second was a bank statement, not for any account I knew about. This was a separate account in Marcus's name only at a bank across town. The balance was $473,000. The third was a lease agreement for an apartment in the city, a 2-bedroom unit in a new luxury building. Lease signed in April 2023, 1 month after my chemotherapy started. Tenant, Marcus Coleman. And the fourth was a photograph, printed on glossy paper, like the kind you get from a professional photographer, a woman with auburn hair and coral nails, smiling at the camera with her hand on a visible baby bump. On the back, in Marcus's handwriting, "Our Little Miracle." October 2023. I sat in that office chair for 23 minutes. I know because I checked the time when I found the folder, and I checked it again when I finally stood up. In those 23 minutes, my entire understanding of my life collapsed. My husband had taken out a life insurance policy on me before I was even diagnosed. He had opened a secret bank account with nearly $500,000. He had leased an apartment for himself and his pregnant mistress while I was losing my hair and vomiting into hospital basins and wondering if I was going to live to see my daughters graduate. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was planning for my death, maybe even hoping for it. I put everything back exactly where I'd found it. I closed the drawer. I found my insurance card in a different folder and went to my pre-surgical appointment. I didn't say a word to Marcus. For the next week, I operated on autopilot. I smiled at my daughters over breakfast. I made small talk with the nurses at my follow-up appointment. I answered Marcus's occasional questions about the surgery logistics with calm, measured responses. Inside, I was made of ice. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell Dr. Reeves, though I wished I could. I didn't tell anyone, because I knew if I said the words out loud, I would shatter into a million pieces, and I might never put myself back together. I needed to survive the surgery first. I needed to survive. October 10th arrived. My mother drove me to the hospital at 5:30 a.m. Marcus said he would come after his morning meeting, which he said he couldn't reschedule. I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy. The surgery took 3 hours. When I woke up, groggy and disoriented, the first face I saw was my mother's. She was holding my hand, tears streaming down her face. "They got it all," she said. "The margins are clean. You did it, baby. You did it." I closed my eyes and let the anesthesia pull me back under. But even in the fog, I held on to one thought. I was going to live. And when I recovered, I was going to take my life back. Marcus showed up 6 hours after my surgery, carrying flowers from the hospital gift shop with the price tag still on them, $34. He stayed for 20 minutes, checked his phone 11 times, and left saying he had a dinner meeting. My mother stayed the night. She slept in the chair beside my bed, waking up every time I stirred, making sure I had water and pain medication and everything I needed. She was 71 years old, and she didn't complain once. I was discharged 3 days later. My mother moved into our guest room to help with my recovery. Marcus complained about the intrusion, but didn't actually do anything to help, so his objection carried no weight. The weeks after surgery were a blur of healing and planning. While my body recovered, my mind worked overtime. I started making copies of documents, bank statements, tax returns, the lease agreement for the mystery apartment. I created a secure email account and emailed everything to myself. I researched divorce attorneys and quietly interviewed 3 of them over the phone. I chose Angela Morrison. She was in her 50s, no nonsense, with a reputation for handling high-asset divorces without mercy. When I told her what I'd found, she was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Coleman," she said finally, "your husband is not just having an affair. He's engaged in systematic financial fraud and what could potentially be construed as something much more sinister. That life insurance policy taken out just before your diagnosis is deeply concerning. We need to proceed carefully." I understood. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a battle. November passed. Dr. Hassan declared that I didn't need radiation after all. My scans were clear. I was officially in remission. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was preparing for war. December arrived with a cold snap that froze the city solid. The girls were busy with finals and winter concerts and the anticipation of Christmas. Marcus was busy with whatever Marcus was busy with. He was sleeping in the guest room now, citing my medical needs as the reason. I didn't argue. The further away from me he was, the better. On December 8th, I was scheduled for my regular follow-up appointment with Dr. Hassan. Just blood work and a check-in, making sure everything was still looking good. Routine, normal, boring in the best possible way. I arrived at the cancer center at 9 a.m., checked in at the front desk, and took my usual seat in the waiting room. The infusion room was through a set of double doors to the left. I'd spent so many hours in there that the nurses knew me by name, knew I liked my blanket warmed, knew I preferred the chair by the window. I wasn't expecting to go to the infusion room that day. I was just there for blood work. But Dr. Hassan had texted me that morning asking if I could stop by after my labs because she wanted to discuss something. So, at 9:47 a.m., after the phlebotomist had drawn 3 vials of my blood and put a cotton ball on the inside of my elbow, I pushed through those double doors and walked into the infusion room. And that's when I saw her. She was standing in the middle of the room, looking around like she was lost. Auburn hair, coral nails, a baby bump that was now unmistakably visible. She was carrying a bouquet of sunflowers, and she was wearing a smug smile that faltered slightly when she saw my bald head, my thin frame, the unmistakable signs of what I'd been through, but only for a second. Then the smile was back, brighter than before. "Elena Coleman?" she asked, like she wasn't sure. "Yes," I said, because what else was there to say? "Good. I've been looking for you." She walked toward me, heels clicking on the linoleum floor. "My name is Kelsey Brennan, and I'm having your husband's baby." The room went quiet. Not silent, exactly, because there were still beeping monitors and murmured conversations and the soft whir of IV pumps. But it felt quiet. It felt like everyone was holding their breath. Kelsey kept walking until she was standing right in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Chanel No. 5. Classic, expensive, probably a gift from Marcus. "I know this must be shocking for you," she said, and her voice had a rehearsed quality to it, like she'd practiced this speech in the mirror. "But I think it's important that you hear this directly from me. Marcus and I are in love. We've been together for almost 2 years, and now that we're having a child together, it's time for him to stop pretending." I didn't say anything. I was frozen, my feet rooted to the linoleum, my mind trying to process what was happening. "He told me about your condition," she continued, gesturing vaguely at my head. "And I'm sorry you're going through that, I really am. But it doesn't change anything. Marcus deserves to be happy. We deserve to be happy. And you deserve to know the truth, so you can start to move on." She thrust the sunflowers toward me, like this was some kind of gift, like she was doing me a favor. "These are for you," she said. "I thought it might brighten up your day." And that's when Dr. Amira Hassan stepped out of her office. I hadn't noticed her. She must have been there the whole time, watching, listening. She was holding her tablet, her face unreadable. "Excuse me, doctor," Hassan said, her voice calm and authoritative. "Who are you, and why are you harassing my patient?" Kelsey turned, momentarily thrown off balance. "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm just having a conversation." "You're in a medical treatment facility, creating a disturbance in front of patients who are fighting for their lives. That's not a conversation. That's harassment." Dr. Hassan walked toward us, positioning herself slightly between me and Kelsey. "I'm going to ask you to leave now." "I have every right to be here," Kelsey said, but her voice was less confident now. "This is a public building. This is a private treatment area, and you are not a patient. You are trespassing. If you don't leave immediately, I will call security and have you removed, and then I will file a report with the police." Kelsey hesitated. She looked at me, then back at Dr. Hassan, calculating. "Fine," she said. "I said what I came to say anyway." She dropped the sunflowers on a nearby chair and turned to leave, but Dr. Hassan wasn't finished. "Actually," she said, and her voice was sharp enough to stop Kelsey in her tracks. "Before you go, I think there's something you should know." Kelsey turned back, one eyebrow raised. "Mrs. Coleman has been my patient for almost a year. I've overseen every aspect of her treatment, including extensive documentation of her medical journey. Part of that documentation includes family medical history and genetic testing, which we conducted because her type of cancer has hereditary implications." Dr. Hassan paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was measured but devastating. "Are you aware that Marcus Coleman underwent a vasectomy in 2015? The silence that followed was absolute. I felt my legs go weak. Marcus had a vasectomy? I didn't know. We'd never discussed it. After Mia was born, he'd said he was done, that 2 children were enough, but he'd never told me he'd actually had surgery. But if that was true, then the baby Kelsey was carrying couldn't possibly be his. Kelsey's face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession: confusion, denial, horror, and finally, devastation. That's not possible," she whispered. He said, "I'm sure he told you many things," Dr. Hassan said, not unkindly. "But I have his medical records from when he was being evaluated as a potential bone marrow donor for his wife last year. He volunteered for testing, though ultimately he wasn't a match. The vasectomy was clearly noted in his medical history." I remembered that. Marcus had made a big show of offering to be tested, calling the hospital himself, telling the girls what a hero Daddy was being. But he hadn't been a match, and he'd seemed almost relieved about it. Now I knew why. Kelsey's hand went to her belly, a protective gesture that suddenly looked desperate rather than triumphant. "But he promised. He said when the baby came, he was going to leave her. He said we would be a family." "It appears," Dr. Hassan said gently, "that you have been lied to. Just as my patient has been lied to. Just as I suspect many women have been lied to." Kelsey's eyes filled with tears. Real tears, not the performative kind she'd probably planned to deploy if I'd reacted with anger. She looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see an enemy. I saw another victim. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. "I swear to you, I didn't know about the vasectomy. He told me you were separated. He told me you hadn't been intimate in years. He told me the marriage was over except for the paperwork. All right, I want to check in with you again." At this moment, I had a choice. I could have been cruel to Kelsey. I could have screamed at her, blamed her, made her feel even worse than she already did. Would you have yelled at her? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to know what you would have done. And if you're dying to see what happens next, make sure you're subscribed. Here's what I actually did. I took a breath. I looked at this woman, this young woman who was pregnant with some stranger's baby and had just found out her entire life was a lie, and I felt something I didn't expect. Compassion. "How far along are you?" I asked. Kelsey blinked, clearly not expecting the question. 24 weeks. "Do you know who the actual father is?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was so sure it was Marcus. We were together almost every day. I wasn't seeing anyone else." "But he was seeing other people," I said. It wasn't a question. By now, I understood exactly who my husband was. I don't know, maybe. There were times when he couldn't see me, when he said he had business trips. I never thought—" She trailed off, unable to finish. Dr. Hassan moved to the nurse's station and came back with a box of tissues, which she handed to Kelsey. "I think you should sit down," she said, "and I think both of you need to have a conversation." She guided us to a quiet corner of the infusion room, away from the other patients. An older woman hooked up to an IV gave me a small nod of solidarity as I passed. I nodded back. Kelsey and I sat across from each other in the chairs where I'd spent so many hours receiving chemotherapy. The sunflowers she'd brought lay forgotten on the floor. "Tell me everything," I said, "from the beginning." And she did. Kelsey Brennan was 32 years old. She'd met Marcus at a networking event in March of 2022, almost 2 years ago. He'd walked up to her at the bar, introduced himself, and told her she had the most beautiful smile he'd ever seen. It was the same line he'd used on me 18 years earlier. He'd pursued her aggressively. Flowers, dinners, weekend getaways. He'd told her he was in a loveless marriage, that his wife was cold and distant, that they'd been sleeping in separate bedrooms for years. He'd told her he stayed for the children, but that as soon as they were old enough, he was going to leave. And then, in January of 2023, He'd told her something else. "He said you were sick," Kelsey said, her voice small. "He said you had cancer and the prognosis wasn't good. He said it would be cruel to leave you when you were dying. So he asked me to wait. He said once it was over, we would be together. Once it was over. Once I was dead. I felt the ice in my chest harden into something unbreakable. When did you find out you were pregnant?" I asked. "May. Right around the time you finished chemo, I think. He was so excited. He said it was a sign. He said we were meant to be." "And the apartment on Lexington Street?" Her eyes widened. "You know about the apartment?" "I found the lease. I also found the bank account and the life insurance policy he took out on me a month before my diagnosis." Kelsey went pale. "The what?" $2 million. He increased my life insurance to $2 million in January 2023, 1 month before I was diagnosed with cancer. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The implications hung in the air between us, too terrible to say out loud. "You think," Kelsey started, then stopped. "You think he knew? Before you were diagnosed?" "I don't know. I don't know if that's even possible. But I know he was planning for my death. I know he was counting on it. And I know he has been lying to both of us." Kelsey put her face in her hands and sobbed. Not the pretty, delicate crying of a woman who wants to look sympathetic. The ugly, gasping sobs of someone whose entire world has just collapsed. I let her cry. I didn't comfort her, but I didn't judge her either. We were both victims here. The only villain was Marcus. When Kelsey finally looked up, her mascara streaked down her cheeks, she asked the question that was clearly burning in her mind. "What do we do now?" I thought about it. I thought about the documents I'd copied, the attorney I'd hired, the months of careful planning I'd done while my husband thought I was too weak and sick to notice anything. "Now," I said slowly, "we stop letting him control the narrative." What followed was 3 weeks of intense preparation. Kelsey and I became unlikely allies. We met at coffee shops and shared information. She had access to Marcus's second phone, the one he'd given her so they could communicate without detection. I had access to our home office and all the financial records he'd tried to keep hidden. Together, we built a case. We discovered that the apartment on Lexington Street wasn't the only secret property. Marcus also had a condo in Florida, purchased 2 years ago, that I'd never known about. And a boat. A 40-foot yacht named Second Chance, which would have been funny if it weren't so horrifying. We discovered that the bank account with $473,000 was actually one of 3 hidden accounts. The total amount Marcus had siphoned from our marital assets was just over $1.2 million. We discovered that Kelsey wasn't the only other woman. There had been others over the years, at least 4 that we could confirm through credit card receipts and hotel bookings. Marcus had a pattern. He found women who were vulnerable, charmed them, used them, and discarded them when they became inconvenient. And we discovered something else. Something that changed everything. Kelsey's baby wasn't Marcus's. That much we knew. But she didn't know who the father was, so she agreed to a prenatal paternity test. It was non-invasive, just a blood draw from her and a sample from the potential father. The potential father, it turned out, was Marcus's business partner, Kevin. Diana's husband, Kevin. Kelsey had met Kevin through Marcus. They'd been at a party together. Marcus had stepped away. Kevin had been charming and attentive, and one thing had led to another. A single night, Kelsey said. A mistake she'd regretted immediately. She'd never told Marcus, and Kevin had never told Diana. Until now. I called Diana on a Wednesday evening in late December. "I need to tell you something," I said, "and you're going to want to sit down." Diana listened in silence as I explained everything. the affair between Kelsey and Marcus, the secret accounts and properties, the life insurance policy, and finally, the paternity test. When I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Diana," I said, "are you still there?" "I'm here." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I think I always knew about Kevin. Deep down, I just didn't want to see it." "I know that feeling. So what do we do now?" It was the same question Kelsey had asked, and now I had an answer. We take them down, together. The confrontation happened on New Year's Eve. Marcus had insisted on hosting a party at our house. It was a tradition, he said. His business partners expected it. Never mind that I was still recovering from cancer treatment. Never mind that I had no energy for hosting. Never mind that I knew he was planning to spend half the evening texting his pregnant mistress from the bathroom. This year, I said yes without argument. Because this year, I had a plan. The party started at 8. 50 guests, catered food, a jazz trio in the corner of the living room. Sophia and Mia were upstairs watching movies, safely out of the way of what was about to happen. Marcus was in his element, working the room, shaking hands, accepting congratulations on the Harrington deal that had finally closed. He was wearing a $3,000 suit and a watch that cost more than some people's cars. He looked like a man who had everything. I stood by the fireplace, nursing a glass of sparkling water, waiting. At 9:30, the doorbell rang. Marcus was in the middle of a conversation with a potential investor, so I went to answer it. I knew who it would be. Kelsey stood on the doorstep, no longer pregnant. She'd had the baby 2 weeks ago, a little girl named Emma. Kevin didn't know yet. Neither did Diana. That revelation was coming, but tonight was about something else. "Are you sure about this?" Kelsey asked, her voice low. "I've never been more sure of anything." I led her into the living room. The effect was immediate. Marcus spotted her from across the room, and his face went through a rapid transformation. Confusion, then recognition, then panic. He excused himself from his conversation and strode toward us. "What are you doing here?" he hissed at Kelsey. "Are you insane? My wife is right there." "I know," Kelsey said calmly. "She invited me." Marcus turned to look at me, and for the first time in our marriage, I saw fear in his eyes. "Elena, what is this?" "This is a reckoning, Marcus. Please, let's go somewhere private. I think you'll want to hear what we have to say without an audience." But Marcus wasn't thinking clearly. He'd had several drinks, and his usual composure was slipping. "I don't know what lies she's told you," he said, his voice rising, "but whatever it is, it's not true. She's been stalking me for months. She's obsessed. I tried to help her once professionally, and she misinterpreted it." "Really?" I pulled out my phone. "Is that why you texted her last night at 11:47 p.m. saying, and I quote, 'I can't wait to hold our baby. Just a few more months and we'll be together. Elena doesn't suspect a thing.'" The room had gone quiet. People were starting to stare. "I don't know what that is," Marcus said, but his voice was weak. "You must have faked it." "I have 2 years of texts, Marcus, 2 years of photos, 2 years of credit card receipts and hotel bills and lies. I have the lease for the apartment on Lexington Street. I have the statements for the 3 hidden bank accounts totaling $1.2 million. I have the deed for the condo in Florida. I have the registration for the boat you named Second Chance, which, by the way, is incredibly on the nose for a serial cheater." By now, half the room was listening. Marcus's business partners, their wives, our neighbors, the investor he'd been trying to impress. All of them, watching. "And I have this," I continued, pulling a document from my purse. "A life insurance policy for $2 million, taken out on me in January 2023, 1 month before I was diagnosed with cancer. Would you like to explain that to everyone, Marcus?" That's standard estate planning. It doesn't mean anything. It means you were betting on me dying. It means while I was sitting in a hospital chair, watching poison drip into my veins, you were across town with your mistress, counting down the days until you could cash in. Marcus's face was red now, his composure completely shattered. You don't know what you're talking about. You're sick, Elena. You're paranoid. The cancer must have affected your brain. And that's when Dr. Amira Hassan stepped forward. I'd invited her too. She'd come in quietly through the back, waiting for the right moment. Now she stood beside me, her presence commanding attention. Actually, Mr. Coleman, I can assure you that your wife's cognitive function is perfectly intact. I've overseen her care for nearly a year, and she is one of the most resilient and clear-headed patients I've ever treated. What she's describing is not paranoia, it's pattern recognition, and I'm happy to testify to that in court, if necessary. Marcus looked at Dr. Hassan like she was a ghost. Who the hell are you? I'm Elena's oncologist. I'm also the person who informed your mistress that you had a vasectomy in 2015, which means the baby she thought was yours is biologically impossible. The gasp that went through the room was audible. Kelsey stepped forward, her voice steady. That's right, Marcus. Emma isn't your daughter. I know who the real father is now, and so does his wife. You've been lying to everyone, including me. I thought you loved me. I thought we were going to build a life together. But you were just using me, the same way you've used your wife, the same way you've probably used every woman who's ever made the mistake of trusting you. Marcus looked around the room, searching for an ally, a defender, anyone. His eyes landed on Kevin, who was standing by the bar with Diana. Kevin, Marcus said desperately, tell them this is crazy. Tell them they're making things up. Kevin looked at his wife. Diana looked back at him, her expression cold. Actually, Diana said, her voice carrying across the room, I think everyone needs to hear something else. Kevin, would you like to tell them? Or should I? Kevin's face went ashen. Diana, please. Kevin is the father of Kelsey's baby, Diana said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He slept with her at a party last year, a party that Marcus hosted. Apparently, these two have been covering for each other for years, business partners in more ways than one. The room exploded in whispers. Marcus and Kevin stood frozen, their carefully constructed lives crumbling around them. I walked to the center of the room and raised my glass of sparkling water. To everyone here tonight, I want to thank you for coming, and I want you to know that I'm filing for divorce. My attorney has already submitted the paperwork, along with evidence of fraud, hidden assets, and potential insurance fraud. Marcus will be hearing from the state bar and possibly the district attorney's office as well. I turned to face my husband directly. You thought I was too sick to notice. You thought I was too weak to fight. You thought you could wait for me to die and then start your new life with the money you stole from our family. But here's what you didn't count on, Marcus. I survived. And I'm going to keep surviving long after you've lost everything. Marcus's face twisted with rage. You can't do this. I'll destroy you. I'll take the girls. I'll take the house. I'll leave you with nothing. Actually, you won't. My attorney, Angela Morrison, stepped through the front door right on cue. She'd been waiting on the porch, documents in hand. I have here a temporary restraining order, preventing Mr. Coleman from accessing any marital assets or coming within 500 feet of his wife or children. I also have documentation of the hidden accounts, which under state law means those assets are subject to civil forfeiture in the divorce proceedings.